I've been working on cassava for the past 25 years, and in Nigeria for that matter. Globally, Nigeria is the leader for cassava. And I will say cassava should be regarded in Nigeria to what wheat is to the Americans and rice is to the Asians, if not even more. Cassava has over 1,000 uses. If we can increase the productivity, we increase its processing through value addition into various products that are required in Nigeria and the subcontinent and the rest of Africa. Nigeria will make billions of dollars from cassava because of its comparative advantage to grow the crop in almost everywhere in the country. If, for instance, we replace 10% of the wheat that is imported into this country with that of high-quality cassava flour, you do the simple mathematics, you know the huge amount of foreign exchange earnings that we can save in this country. Cassava is the #1 poverty fighter in Nigeria and in Africa. This was already known since 2003 in what they call the Maputo Declaration, in which it was stated that cassava, if efforts are put into its improvement in terms of increasing its productivity, adding value, it will generate income, it will alleviate poverty, and in fact, it was rated #1, followed by maize and rice. When we talk about the value chain, we're talking about production to consumption. And when I say production, it also includes the input supplies, right, onto consumption, market and consumption. And cassava is a crop, after harvest, can deteriorate very quickly. But if you can process into various products, it can store for over 8 months, any of the byproducts. So, in other words, we should focus on the processing of cassava into those products which we utilize in large quantities, those products for which we consume in large quantities but we don't produce in the country, and also those products that can diversify the use of cassava to create more demand for our produce, the cassava produce. And I'll give you 3 examples. One is gari. Gari is a very popular food in Nigeria, and it's a very fast food. And beside Nigeria, most countries now in sub-Saharan Africa, where gari was not important, gari is becoming important. So Nigeria can export gari into neighboring countries like Sierra Leone, Guinea, Liberia, and so on. Then another product that we consume in large quantities in this country, but we don't produce much, is starch. And cassava starch is one of the finest starch. And there are several uses of starch in this country. If we can produce cassava and convert it into high-grade starch, we can generate a lot of income and save a lot of foreign exchange. Then the third one is ethanol. Ethanol is used for several things because it's an essential, it's a very important nutrient chemical that our body needs, not just for getting drunk. It's used in the pharmaceuticals to produce a number of drugs. It's also used in the laboratories, in the universities and so on for several experiments. So cassava can be converted into ethanol, and I do know now there is an ethanol factory in Nigeria, the Allied Atlantic factory, that wants a lot of cassava to produce ethanol. But the production plant is underutilized because they are not getting enough cassava to produce this ethanol. So what is needed is to grow more cassava, increase its productivity through training of the farmers on improved crop management practices so that they will have sufficient quantities to use in these emerging industries in Nigeria. When it comes to cassava, I don't see anything bad about it, particularly when it comes to consumption of it, as long as it's processed properly. The high quality cassava cassava flour has been shown to produce very good bread, very acceptable bread, when it's included at different percentages into wheat flour to make bread that we all like in Nigeria. It's also a fast food. And we have shown that up to 40% of high quality cassava can be incorporated to wheat flour to have acceptable bread. But we are saying between 10 and 20% use in cassava, in wheat flour of the high quality cassava flour, you will never tell the difference between bread made from wheat or bread made from that combination. So therefore, I will encourage the bakers to really use the combination of high quality cassava and wheat flour for making their bread up to 20%. But why there is reluctance in adapting this to the existing wheat flour milling system that is in the country? The regularity of the quality and the supply is the issue. Some farmers will tell me, look, I have plenty cassava, where do I sell my cassava? The flour millers will say, look at me now, I need cassava, high quality cassava. Where do I get this cassava flour? The market, the demand and the supply are not communicating. So we need to improve the market linkages by linking the producers to the users, that the flour millers. One of the constraints to increase cassava production and productivity is weeds in cassava farms. It's very laborious for the farmers to weed their cassava farms. I'll give a simple example. You have a 1 hectare cassava farm and you have one farmer, say for instance in the southern Nigeria. When he starts weeding, by the time it gets to the middle of the plot, the 1 hectare plot, the beginning of the plot has become weedy again. By the time it gets to the end of the 1 hectare, up to the middle of the plot has become weedy again. Then he has to start the process again at the beginning. Then you find out you can use the whole of the 365 days weeding his cassava field, particularly in the most humid areas where you have a lot of rainfall. And so he will not have time to do other things, to take care of the welfare of his wife or the welfare of his family. But besides, weeding in cassava is mainly done by women, and often children recall from school to assist their parents to weed. And this is affecting the socioeconomic, the social fabric of the society, because those kids will not learn what they are supposed to teach them in school, but rather they are in the field weeding. Right, that's one. Then it's a very laborious task because the women have to bend their backs with the hoe to weed, you know. It has health problems. So what we at IITA have decided to do is that we should take weed control very seriously to alleviate the strain weeding puts on women and children in particular in cassava farms. And so we have a cassava weed management project where we are looking at efficient and effective options for weed control in cassava. We are looking at just the agronomy of the crop, how you can plant, how you can arrange the crop in the field, the density, such that it can smoother weeds, because when there is no sunlight to reflect on the weeds will not grow. That's one. Then we are also looking at mechanical weed control, simple mechanical weed control that are user-friendly, that women and even children over the weekend can use to weed. And we've imported some of these, and we are adapting them for use in cassava farms in Nigeria. This is the first year of experimentation, and from the way things are going, we are going to come up by the third year with few options that we will try to test with as many farmers as possible. Here, we are going to develop an investment project that will cover up to 20 states of the Federation. But what has been successful so far? We have screened about 40 new herbicides, and we found out that about 8 of them that are pre-emergent herbicides, and about another 8 are post-emergent herbicides that show very great promise for weed control in cassava fields. Then in terms of the weeders, we've identified a particular simple, light-weighted weeder, which is called the Mantis rotary weeder, which also show great promise for cassava farms in Nigeria. But we are waiting on the agronomy trials because we wanted an integrated control of weeds in Nigeria, combining a basket of options so that farmers have the liberty to choose which ones they can afford to use, depending on their socioeconomic profile. Right now, about 50 to 60% of yield losses can be attributed to weeds in cassava fields. There are other factors that reduce yields in cassava, but weeds is an important constraint, as I mentioned the value to you just now. If we can do timely weeding with simple machines, or by adjusting the agronomy of the crop, or by using cheap and safe herbicides, we can increase the productivity by another 40 to 50%. And that will be a bingo for cassava farmers in Nigeria. That's one of the economic impact of weed control that we are looking forward to.